Information Technology Leaders is sponsored by Nextel Partners, a wireless services provider in mid-size U.S. markets. Together with Nextel, it's the only wireless provider to offer Direct Connect, a powerful, long-range digital walkie-talkie feature combined with a cell phone. This week on Information Technology Leaders, John Chappell, Chairman and CEO of Nextel Partners. Now here's your host, Laura Schildkraut.
Today's guest is the Chairman and CEO of Nextel Partners. Through a career of over 25 years, he's never really written a resume. He just never had to. The combination of brains, talent, drive, and an ability to balance a deep caring for people with a relentless focus on mission has given him a network that always seemed to keep him well employed and in demand. This network moved him from working in government to the cable industry and then to wireless. He then followed his love of athletics to lead Vancouver's professional hockey and basketball teams before moving back into wireless to start Nextel Partners. Over the past 5 years, he's brought in a hand-selected management team. Not only has this team led the company to unanticipated growth, but also none of those managers has chosen to leave or has sold a single share of stock. And as you know, these have not been easy years. Now that really says something about a strong belief in a company and its leader. Please welcome John Chappell. So John, where did you grow up?
Oh, I'm still working on growing up, Laura. But actually, I was born in northern Wisconsin and moved around the Midwest. And high school years were spent in upstate New York, about 20 miles from the Canadian border. And from there, went down the road to Syracuse University where I did my undergrad work.
Yeah. So while you were growing up and moving around, did you like it at the time, and how do you feel about it looking back?
Well, when you get yanked out of school and your parents tell you you're moving, at the time, that specific second, it can be a little unsettling. But with reflection, I think the opportunity of having lived in a number of places growing up proved to be a benefit later on in life because you get thrown into different circumstances. So the fact that we bounced around a bit, it was helpful later on as I was thrown into different situations with my career.
Yeah,
so.
Just easy to deal with that. What were you like in high school?
Well, none of my teachers are here to talk about that. I was curious.
Were you? Was that a good thing?
Yeah, generally, except when we locked the English teacher out of the room when she shouldn't have been outside the classroom. But
did she like that at all?
No, I've always been more of a generalist in terms of how I approach things. So took advantage of a variety of whether it was academics or from the extracurricular activity standpoint, played sports and the yearbook and student council, and ran for president and lost, so had to settle for a representative seat. But
to deal with
that.
Yeah,
it was, it was fun.
There's one part of your extracurricular activity you didn't talk about, which is drama. Could you tell us about your improvisational version of Gone with the Wind?
Well, you're going back all the way to high school English.
Yeah, I am.
I mean, basically.
Where you locked the teacher out of the room.
Yeah, that might have been the same day, actually. Yeah, well, we were supposed to actually mime titles to books, and Gone with the Wind is what happened with the teacher. She wound up being out of the room, but yeah, it was creative. Let it go at that. So.
Okay. When did you first realize you were smart?
I'm not sure that's dawned on me yet. I don't know. Common sense maybe would be a good term. The ability to work with a lot of different people in a myriad of different situations. I'm not sure if I'd categorize that as smart, but it's certainly been helpful to adapt to a lot of different situations with people of different personalities. That's certainly beneficial, whether it's in school or whether it's in your working career.
Yeah. How did you select Syracuse University?
They gave me money.
They gave you money.
So
okay.
that made it a pretty easy decision. Yeah, and it wasn't for basketball either. It was academic. So.
Now, this is going back a few years, but when I was of college age, we always thought of Syracuse as kind of a party school. Was that an accurate representation then, and is it an accurate representation now?
Well, my son's a junior there, and he would not tell you that it's an accurate representation now, since he tells me he studies all the time.
Of
right?
course he does.
But I mean, it was kind of a work hard, play hard atmosphere, and since I went there in the 70s, the entrance requirements have become more difficult. They're sort of a notch below Ivy League at this point. I serve on one of their boards, and I've seen that the standards have gotten more rigorous over the years. But I felt that I received a good education there, and also had a fair share of good time as well. So.
What did you major in?
Political science, actually.
Why?
With the thought that I would become a lawyer. And even though Syracuse helped me out a little bit financially, upon graduating, I had these things called student loans that required being paid back. So rather than off to law school, I was fortunate enough to get a job and start paying back those loans.
But before that happened, you ended up taking a year off during college. Why was that, and what did you do?
Yeah, that was really precipitated by the fact that I thought I was going to be drafted. The Vietnam War was going on, and I pulled a very low draft number. There was a lottery back in those days, and I pulled number 50. I'll never forget that, because in that era, just about everyone below 200 and below were going, and there were no student deferments at that time. So when I pulled 50, at the time it seemed to be a foregone conclusion that I was going to be drafted. And so rather than go back to school, I was just working for a while. And then I went for my pre-induction physical. This shows how you can be fortunate in life. I went for my pre-induction physical, and of course passed with flying colors. And they drafted 1 through 27 in the county where I resided. So then within the next 2 weeks, I was supposed to get my papers. And President Nixon put a moratorium on the draft right before I was going to go. So since it was already mid-semester, I hitchhiked across the country from New York to California and worked construction until the fall, and then hitchhiked back and went back to school.
What did that experience teach you?
The hitchhiking's a slow way to get back and forth across the country. That was actually pretty interesting too. I wouldn't recommend that for anyone. This was back in the early 70s, and I think that if my son or any of my nieces and nephews were hitchhiking these days, I'd be quite upset. But that was an interesting experience. In fact, I even hitchhiked into Mexico and back through Canada, and really and met a lot of great people. In fact, at the time, I found it very reinforcing, because in terms of believing in kind of the human condition and people's innate goodness, just about everybody that offered me a ride turned out to be super. Yeah. So.
Was it hard to get back into the academic groove upon your return?
No, I was thrilled, actually.
Right.
I mean, when you think of rice paddy versus political science class,
it's better.
Yeah. My grades went up dramatically, actually.
So your first job out of college, you had a short stint somewhere. What did you do, and why did you leave so quickly?
The very first job?
The very first job.
The very first job was selling meat freezer plans door to door in Syracuse, New York. So this it was just cold calling. You basically knock on doors and try to sell T-bones to people, and it was a difficult job.
Because then you ask them, where are you going to put all those T-bones, and that's when you sell them the freezer, which is where you make the money.
Well, but it wasn't I who made the money. It was the people that sent me out that made the money.
Right. That's where the money is made.
Yeah, it was a short stint. So.
Yes, and I know a good bit about that, because when I was in New York in between my junior and senior year of high school, I did a summer job where we had to do cold calling to try and set up appointments for people to go to sell people meat services and freezers. So we have that wonderful common bond there.
Yeah, it was an absolute no-win situation too. Both of my sisters are vegetarians, and So there was no empathy at home either. So
So how did the position with the city of Syracuse come about?
that was really fortuitous in that there were these federal government grants at the time for people who needed a job, and there happened to be an opening in the budget department at the city of Syracuse, and there was quite a number of people interested in it. But through the interview process, I was fortunate enough to be selected.
And what were your responsibilities?
Initially, doing the budget for the City of Syracuse Parks and Recreation Department, and that included deciding what to do with government funding, building a park, if you will, or a ball diamond, or just staffing the city pools, things like that. And from there, I sort of evolved into doing some work with the city council and the mayor's office. And one thing about working for the city, if you're willing to volunteer, you can get all sorts of fun assignments, and so it was a interesting couple of years, particularly coming off of the poli-sci degree.
Did that prepare you to do the kind of work you were doing?
Well, I don't know if it was a glove fit necessarily, but it certainly was an area of interest of mine. Government always has been. Political science made sense, and I'd been involved in a number of campaigns, knocking on doors for Bobby Kennedy back in the '60s and things like that. So, yeah, so it was fun. In fact, I think our mayor was supporting Senator Jackson, so I can remember going door to door for him because the mayor ordered me to.
Right.
So
Whoa. Hard to say no to that.
you didn't say no to the mayor. No,
No. So you spent about 3 years working for the city of Syracuse. Why did you leave?
Well, it was an interesting opportunity. In the latter part of the '70s, the cable TV industry was just sort of taking off like a rocket. And Syracuse in particular had put together a potential contract with a number of companies to build what was then, and frankly still is, a very sophisticated cable system. And in this particular instance, the cable system was a two-way cable system. Now most people use the two-way component to order pay-per-view, for instance, pay-per-view movies. But then this particular system had a fire alarm and protection component in it that we put these devices in low-income housing, and it was free of charge to the people who received it. So, for instance, if your fire alarm went off, it sent a signal through the cable system straight to the fire department, and then within 6 seconds they had a printout that said, there's smoke at 42 Elm Street, and it simultaneously made your phone ring, and when you picked it up, if you were able, you were talking to the fire dispatcher. So this was all inherent in the cable system in the '70s.
Pretty cool.
It was one of only a couple, and the job that I was offered was to oversee the development of that project. And what was really neat about it is that it was an excellent blend of kind of the public sector and the private sector, but even more so, we saved lives. And I mean, there are some people that are alive today as a result of having that system installed in their home, and I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
No, and there are a lot of kinds of projects that you work on, but when you look at fulfilling.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me, that was at that particular point in time, that project, I feel extremely fortunate to get an opportunity like that, where you're not only gainfully employed, but much more importantly, you're responsible for something that kept some people alive that wouldn't be otherwise, potentially.
So you've talked about the bridge between public and private. Was that difficult for you?
We were working so hard, and there was so much, because the cable system, the cable TV system, was a ground up build, and so it was so fast and furious that there really wasn't a lot of time to reflect. It was just build this thing, try and keep everyone happy, and so I was very, very busy. So there wasn't a lot of reflection on public versus private. It was just
do the job.
Yep.
And then at age 27, you were promoted to general manager. Looking back on it, how do you think you earned that promotion?
Well, again, I mentioned that I picked a particular industry that was growing very, very rapidly, and the company that I was with was growing rapidly and expanding into other markets. So the original vice president and general manager of the system in Syracuse was actually he was promoted. So you know, they kind of looked around and said, well, we'll give this guy a chance.
Okay.
So it was part of it was, I'd say, part of it's hard work, and part of it was, you know it was
The only one
fortuitous.
still standing?
Yeah, I mean, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. So.
Now, as you, again, look back on it with more mature eyes, what characteristics besides hard work do you think they saw in you that said that this guy can pull it off?
Well, I mentioned that sort of this, you know, this volunteerism attitude. I think that will take you a long way if you're willing to, no matter what the circumstance, to sort of stand up and be counted. I think also that a number of people were hired all at once with, you know, a fairly large task to perform, and the idea of getting all these people to kind of coalesce and move forward together, that was, or it's a sort of another way of putting it is I kind of got along with everybody, which is pretty important in a fast-paced environment. You don't really have time for, you know, nonsense or politics, and so the ability to interact well with everyone. I think some people felt that I exhibited some of those qualities, I guess.
Were there any particular challenges you ended up having as a young GM?
Well, I was a poli-sci major. I wasn't a finance major, so I probably, you know, would have taken a couple more accounting classes. Back then, inflation was rampant, and we were borrowing a lot of money and trying to get rate hikes on occasion from, so we were regulated by the government, and so there was a significant financial component to the position that I really sort of, you know, learned on the fly as opposed to having a significant amount of training. So I would say that the learning the numbers was a challenge.
And how did the other people accept your being a young GM?
You know, it was a young industry, and most of the people there too were pretty young, if not in age and heart. So there really wasn't, as I recall, much issue around that.
You're lucky.
Yeah, if you're willing to, also if people see that you're always willing to go the extra mile and basically do anything that anyone else would do, you know, any sort of pettiness usually will fall by the wayside. You put yourself in a position where you're beyond reproach, I guess.
So you were pretty happy with the company, yet after about 5 years you decided to leave. What happened?
Again, the industry growth characteristics were still dramatic. I mean, people like, you know, Ted Turner were putting new stations on satellite on a regular basis. When I first got in, I think Turner had one station on satellite, and the HBO was in existence, but over those few years, things like CNN and MTV came into being. So I can remember that the first day when MTV was launched, I was with the engineers trying to make sure that hopefully that it worked, and so there was a lot of hype around it. So there was a rapid growth curve, and a lot of cities were building large systems, and I received an opportunity from a Boston-based company. The company that I'd been with in Syracuse was actually a Canadian-based company, and they were limited in terms of, there was congressional action to kind of limit what was called foreign ownership, and so the opportunities to grow were really more with American-based companies. It was a big deal because U.S. companies couldn't have a majority interest in Canadian broadcast companies, and so the same sort of thing happened in the U.S. So to continue advancing, I moved to another company that was based out of Boston. My original tour duty with them was in Florida, and which was, you know, during the Miami Vice days, so that was interesting. and then eventually wound up being in Boston with them.
Mm-hmm. What did the company do specifically?
Same thing. It was in the cable TV business and building out large markets in South Florida and outside New York, all around Boston. I remember meeting with Tip O'Neill and lobbying, trying to lob Tip O'Neill into letting us get the Cambridge cable TV franchise.
Did that work?
You know, all politics are local. That's in his autobiography. And you know, I sat down and had a Bloody Mary with Tip and explained to him how great we were. And next thing I know, he called the city manager in Cambridge, and we had to earn it, of course. But
yeah. That's how you get in the door, though.
yeah, and also the same company was building systems in Chicago and Los Angeles. So it was an exciting time then, because it was a whole introduction of a range of products that hadn't existed before.
And what were your responsibilities specifically?
Well, there I wound up being, rather than kind of, in Syracuse, it was a specific on-site responsibility for Syracuse. What wound up with the next company, it was called American Cable Systems. I had multiple state responsibilities, so I was kind of running around you know, Florida operations, Boston operations, New York operations, that type of thing. So, which is why I wound up being located in Boston, because it was a better, you know, sort of centralized base.
For you to be in.
Yeah.
So at this point you were promoted from VP to SVP. What were some of the differences in the scope of the responsibility? Was it just about the region?
Yeah, I think there is a dramatic difference when you have something that you're shepherding and you're sort of right there every day, as opposed to being on an airplane and going from system to system to system, where somebody else is there with the day-to-day responsibility. And so you have to learn to, you know, to kind of be more a step removed. You want to sort of counsel people, but you also don't want to be overbearing. So it's a little bit of a different relationship.
In some ways, it's also the difference between management and leadership.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
In some ways.
Yeah, those aren't mutually exclusive necessarily.
No, not at all.
But yeah, I did not anymore have sort of day-to-day, I'm working with these people 12 hours a day. It's sort of, you come in for a day or two and then boom, you're off to the next place. And it's someone else that's responsible for the day-to-day. And it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Did you like it?
Yeah, I did. I mean, there's there'll always be there's this emotional soft spot that you have for you know, something that you're you know, babying and watching grow every day. But you know, again, it was another challenge, and one that was gratifying. So.
And kind of the obvious growth path.
Absolutely,
as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, basically, when the principals of the company tell you to do it, sort of, okay.
Yeah, saying no thank you is sort of a career-limiting move.
That would be correct, Lori. Yeah.
When did you first meet Craig McCaw?
Well, when I was working in the cable TV business, Craig was also at the with McCaw Cable, and actually our company and Craig and his brothers were kind of going around the country looking at opportunities. And I think the first place that we crossed paths, I think we were both looking at Tucson, Arizona. But in a weird sort of series of events, sometime after I left Syracuse, Craig actually wound up buying the Syracuse operation. So he owned it for a while. And he called me sometime in the early '80s and said he was looking to add to his add people to his organization. But I was under contract, you know, morally more than anything else with another organization. And so, but we met, I believe it was in Florida in 1983, '84, and he talked to me about joining his company. I said no, I couldn't. And I remember him saying then, so this is 20 years ago, he said, well, I take sort of a long-term outlook on these sort of things, so maybe we'll meet again. And
You
so
think?
it turned out it did. That
Yeah.
is what happened.
So you started with American Cable Systems in 1983. What was happening with the company in 1987?
Yeah, we had reached a certain point in size where a couple things were happening. We were either going to kind of have to take that next step from a mid-sized company to a really large company, and with that, there's a cultural change that can take place in the organization. And the person that founded the company felt that he'd rather, this is my interpretation, he'd rather sell the company than take the next step. And the next step invariably meant that some people who'd been with the organization from the beginning were probably not going to make that next step as the company evolved. And so he elected to sell the company in late '87, which actually happened. And that's when I received a call from Craig telling me that I didn't have any more excuses. So I heard he was, the ink wasn't dry on our merger, and
Right.
I was chatting with Mr. McCaw about the next project.
Now, negotiations can be kind of tricky, and you told me that you sort of used one to leverage the other. Can you tell some of our students about some things to look for and not look for in those kind of negotiations?
Well, the most leverage that you have is before you join, right? So do your best bargaining before you sign on the dotted line. That's just, again, that's common sense. And the company that was acquiring American Cable Systems wanted me to stay on, and had made me, I thought, a very fair offer to stay, which is something when I sat down to meet with Craig was, I
Handy.
guess, yeah, some leverage. So I basically tabled that with Craig during the course of our negotiations. But it's also smart not to get too greedy either. But don't think once you're hired that that's your best opportunity to maximize your position as pre-hire.
So once again, this job required a move. Were
Yeah.
you ready to leave the East Coast?
You know, but this kind of goes back to moving around so much as a kid that wasn't particularly daunting.
But now it wasn't just you.
No, that's true. There's family involved at this point, but you know, it's all right, son. This was good for me. It'll be good for you. So it worked. It worked out, and you know, the Northwest is great. It's hard to complain about.
Yeah, truly. How did the cultures at McCaw Cellular differ from that of American Cable Systems?
One of the things that attracted me to McCaw were the similarities between the two organizations, because there was a real focus on camaraderie and sort of a team orientation. And we always talked about you know teams are more powerful than individuals, and both fast growth organizations with visionary leaders, and so there were. It wasn't like this 180 jump into something entirely new. Granted, it was a different business, but from a cultural perspective, there were some distinct similarities, which helped make the decision easier.
And what was your title and what were your responsibilities?
Well, I was recruited. The specific title was Executive Vice President of Operations, and McCaw Cellular was building cellular systems all around the country, and we basically set them up in regions. So it was my responsibility to kind of go out and help the various regional presidents across the. I'm from corporate, and I'm here to help.
Yeah, they usually like that a lot.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. I always did. So, but you know, again, it was a good group of people, and our goals are there's total goal alignment.
Right.
I mean, you're trying to create value, and you're trying to create an environment that people enjoy coming to work in. So, you know, really, it's as long as people kind of keep their feet on the ground and their head square on their shoulders, it's very workable.
And also, I mean, the comment that you just made, well, I always did, just having been in the position of knowing what it's like when somebody comes from corporate to help.
Right.
you know what to avoid and you know what to do, and if you're smart at all about it, you know how to handle it to make it work.
Yeah, again, there's, I mean, having experience to draw from is invaluable. So, you know, whether, I guess sort of the tripwires where my presence into, you know, going to, you know, pick at whatever part of the country it was, Texas or New York City or what have you, I suppose I knew some of the things just as importantly not to do as things to do. And
Give us a couple of not tos.
well, I think there's a real premium in going into just about any situation and, you know, being in listen mode rather than, you know, transmit mode. It's better to be in receive mode than transmit mode. I mean, those people are there every day. They're the ones interacting with the customers every day and with the various folks in the organization. So to kind of go into certain places with a predetermined agenda, it doesn't necessarily always serve you well. Granted, there's sort of macro objectives that everybody shares. I mean, financial objectives, and but you can't lose. I don't think by being in an environment and creating an environment where you are perceived and you really do listen to what people have to say and act accordingly.
What encouraged you to further your education?
Well, since I didn't go to law school, it was one of the things that had always bugged me, you know, that I hadn't gone on and got a graduate degree. And I was fortunate, we reached a point at McCaw where there was an opportunity to go do this sort of the slam dunk mini MBA at Harvard, and I took advantage of it. You know, the company was kind enough to pick up the tab, and it was sort of a 3-month crash. You know, mini MBA, I guess is the best way to describe it. You live on campus. You have class 6 days a week. They made you wear suits, which, you know, we didn't even wear.
Wear suits at work.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I had to go buy a couple ties to go to school. I mean, that was weird. But
Some battles are worth fighting, and some you just let go.
we actually we staged a mini revolt toward the end of the semester. I think we finally got to not wear ties on Saturdays or something like that. So we weren't totally successful. But,
Wow.
you know, those Harvard profs, they're tough. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a rigorous program. I'm very glad I did it, though.
What did you get out of the program, and what did you put into it?
A lot of hours, because Harvard uses the case study method, and they piled on a lot of work in a short period. It really is a cram session, because in addition to classes 6 days a week, then Sunday was, you know, various study groups, because it was virtually impossible to read every single case study thoroughly. So you'd have, you know, study groups that you worked with. But I think, you know, with the benefit of 10 years separation, the fact that 2/3 of my classmates were from outside the United States, and you know, we lived together in a dorm, and a number of these people hadn't, you know, been away from home since, you know, for 20 years or what have you, and that was a real eye opener. Spending time with people from different cultures. Just, you know, on my floor there, you know, someone from Japan, Norway, I mean, really all over the globe, countries in Africa, New Zealand, Fiji. So it was that was really interesting.
What did you feel better able to do upon your return?
Again, you know, so kind of like the analogy with moving around a lot. Certainly, I had a higher comfort level in meeting people from different cultures after that experience, and learning some of the nuances of other people's cultures. You live with people, you know, every day for 3 months. You learn a lot about them and about where they're from, and So hopefully I wasn't perceived as the ugly American at the end of it. But
So once again, you come back to the company and you find yourself with a company that's being acquired. Can you tell us what was going on inside the company at this time?
yeah, that was a fairly protracted negotiation. I was involved with elements of that deal. AT&T wound up acquiring McCaw Cellular, and it was a couple-year process. And for myself, as we went through it, it became clear that it was going to be significantly different. AT&T was a very, very large organization. I joined McCaw when it had a few hundred people. It had since grown to a few thousand, but AT&T had probably more people in their headquarters in New Jersey than we did through our whole company. And so clearly it was going to be different. Different doesn't necessarily mean bad, just different. And by that time, I'd been with McCaw for 7 years. My I guess deepest loyalties, if you were with Craig McCaw, who was moving on post-merger. So as we got closer and closer to the merger, and shortly after the merger, I moved on.
And at this point, you had 2 offers. What were they, and why did you make the decision you did?
The following the merger with AT&T, I had the opportunity to go back and to Boston and be the president of a telecommunications company. The other offer was sort of different.
Yeah.
And that Craig's brother John had acquired a majority interest in the Vancouver Canucks, which is an NHL hockey team, and what was going to become the Vancouver Grizzlies, which is an NBA basketball team, and then build an arena, General Motors Place, GM Place. And so John was looking for someone to oversee those 3 entities, the 2 teams and the about-to-be-built arena. And with the sale of McCaw, I was in kind of a fortunate position where I could kind of choose what one seemed like more fun. And actually, I didn't have to, because my son said, "Dad, you'd be an idiot if you don't go take this sports job." So off we went to Vancouver, and spent 3 years in BC, which was that's a beautiful part of the world. I love Vancouver.
You had told me that you were taking something that was your hobby and turning it into your vocation.
Yeah.
Was it as much fun as you thought it would be?
Yeah. Initially it was just because it was a real kick. I mean, we started the basketball team, and we drafted someone from my alma mater, and then, which is probably exactly what you shouldn't do.
Right.
But sports in Canada is tough. I mean, a number of the hockey teams have actually, I would say, unfortunately, from an emotional standpoint, have moved to the States because of the economics, and it's very, very hard to make that business work because your largest expense component is payroll, and that's in U.S. dollars, but yet your revenues are in Canadian dollars, and so while it was a lot of fun building the arena and hiring all the people, and everyone gets so excited about sports and everything, and that it was a real kick at the front end. But when you saw kind of the economic realities of it, and then as time went on, I spent more of my time dealing with sports agents and negotiations for players, which is about as fun as nailing Jello to the wall. And I just that's not particularly, didn't find that particularly joyful. So it's interesting because a lot of people said, "Wow, you had this. How could you leave a job like that? How could you?" And well, when you're in it and you're spending countless hours dealing with an agent who's trying to grind you or grind the organization for as much money as possible, so his commission can be as high as possible, and that sort of thing goes on day after day after day after day. under the glare of the media, which is incessant. I can't really say that toward the end that it was a heck of a lot of fun. So it was sort of, yeah, it was fun, and it was something that, you know, we're glad we did, but I'm also very glad to be doing what I'm doing now.
Okay, so what happened next?
Well, you know, the Macaw connection. Craig had been involved. Actually, you know, came to the rescue of Nextel as they were constructing the urban markets in the U.S. But they'd hit sort of a financial wall, and he just really called me up one day and said, you know, do you think that you could go out and get separate financing to build the mid-sized markets across the country, and those would be markets as far west as Honolulu and as far east as you know, Albany, New York, and a lot of other mid-sized cities in between. And so I tapped a number of my ex-Macaw Cellular colleagues on the shoulder and said, are you up for some fun? And went about to procure financing, and that was 5 years ago. And since that time, we've taken the company public, and we're weathering the kind of the telecom downturn right now, but we're very well poised for a very successful future, and which is again, consider yourself fortunate, because there are a number of companies in this area as well that have not only fallen on hard times, but have actually gone out of business.
Fallen, yeah.
Yeah, fallen,
Completely
period,
fallen.
yeah.
What is your title?
My title to the investment community?
Yes, that title.
Chairman and CEO of Nextel Partners.
And what title appears on your business card?
It simply says partner.
Okay. Why is that important to you, and has that ever caused you a problem?
The whole culture of our organization is that, and now there's nearly 2,500 of us, is that everybody has a very important role to play. I don't care what you do with our company. Whatever it is that you do matters. And you know, one of the statements from the outset, and this, you know, it's somewhat symbolic, but was, you know, we just, you know, we're into titles. It's not something that we felt it wasn't important to us internally as we were building the organization. So it's, I mean, I sent out a biweekly newsletter. I sent it out before I came over here today, and it's just, hey partners, and you know, kind of this is what's been going on in this part of the world the last couple of weeks, and everybody refers to one another as a fellow partner. And some people on Wall Street found that a little bit odd, in that there was this sort of aversion to titles, and it actually manifested itself when we took the company public in February of 2000, and I'll leave off the name of the Wall Street firm that was leading us through the public offering, but they came by our offices and were kind of giving us the rules and regulations of how we should behave when we go around the world and try to sell this offering. And they told myself and some of the others that we had to change our business cards, and that, you know, yours has to say CFO, and yours has to say marketing, and yours has to say president, you know, and we said no, and they said no, you have to do this. And we sort of took the position that if it was so important for someone else, another institution, to invest in us because what our business card said, then, you know, maybe they might want to invest in someone else. So I don't know if I'd term it a problem. It was just sort of a philosophical point of view that we had, and it still says partner. So.
What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of starting a company from scratch?
Well, disadvantages are you don't have any money.
Yeah, that's a big one.
After I got my first paycheck after 16 months, so my wife was getting a little nervous. The But the advantage is that you sort of have a whiteboard, and you can take it, obviously with some kind of restraints, but take it in almost any direction you want, as long as you ultimately wind up creating value for your investors and your shareholders. So we were able to kind of create a culture that we felt would, that people would want to join and grow and prosper in. So that's, there's a tremendous amount of gratification in something like that.
There are a lot of companies out there that are selling wireless minutes. How do you differentiate yourself?
We're fortunate in that, and that was one of the things that attracted me back to the industry, having been out of it for 3 years. The Nextel product is what we term a differentiated product. We have what we call, it's a direct connect component, but it's a walkie-talkie feature that's built into the phone. So beyond just being able to place ordinary calls, you can push a button and talk to people, a person one-on-one just by pushing a button, or 100 people. And right now that has a large regional capability where I just hit the button on the side of the phone and I'm talking to someone in Portland. And right now we're transitioning where we'll be able to do that later this year nationwide. So you could be here in Seattle and I could be in New York, and one of the audience members could be in Florida, and we could all just be pushing one button, talking to one another. And it's a very powerful tool for businesses that need to be in instant contact with their people, and need to be able to move people around at a moment's notice. And nobody else in the industry has that capability, and it's something that Craig McCaw, to his credit, saw an opportunity in, and invested over $1 billion in a number of years ago. And it's a very powerful business tool, and for that matter, it's pretty convenient for people like my son and his friends, where they can just go meet you at the library or meet you at the bar.
Whatever it is they're saying.
So.
It's always important to objectively measure how a company is doing. Can you talk a little bit about customer retention and revenue per subscriber and those metrics?
Yeah, those are
the big ones.
Those are fun for us to talk about because we're actually the industry leaders, and retention of your customers is so important because you spend a fair amount of money to acquire a customer, and then it's 2 steps back if you lose them. So we, in the industry vernacular, there's a term called churn when you lose a customer, and I prefer to think of it in terms of retention. But our churn rate has been over the last 2 years 1.6%. The industry norm has been north of 3%. So we've been able to retain our customers far better than any wireless carrier, and I attribute that really to sort of 2 things: the fact that we have a differentiated product, but also I take you back to the culture where everybody shares in the value creation. All the people, everyone in our company can get stock options in the company, and there are also specific bonuses that we all share in if we hit certain customer satisfaction thresholds. So it's from that standpoint, we're all kind of in it together, and also because of the nature of the product, on a monthly basis, the amount of revenue we get per customer is among the highest in the industry as well. So we're recognized as this kind of upstart who has these industry-leading metrics, which is kind of cool.
In 2001 and 2002, Nextel Partners was named Best Large Company to Work For by the Washington CEO magazine. How do you leverage that kind of recognition, and how do you use that type of thing within a company?
Well, certainly it's a reaffirmation of sort of the things that we say that we stand for, which is caring for our people and caring for our customers. And so for all of our all of my fellow partners, if you will, seeing that kind of recognition, considering how hard they work day in, day out, it's a morale booster. It's also I think, I can't quantify it for you exactly, but that type of recognition isn't lost on businesses that we may that we may interact with, or for that matter, the communities that we that we operate in, where we try to have. We also try to give back to the communities that we operate in, and that's one of the reasons, by the way, that's a contributing factor that we won the award, because whether it's working with school districts or Habitat for Humanity, those are initiatives that on a market-by-market basis we get involved in. And so all of this stuff it all works together.
You talked about how everybody in the company is referred to as a partner, and I know you've talked a lot about a flat organizational structure in the past, and that's been important. How flat is it, and why is that important to you?
Well, see, again, I guess that's where you get to draw on experience again, because I'd say that there were a number of tremendous people at AT&T. I could see that with tens and tens and tens of thousands of people, that it's hard to have everyone kind of rowing together simultaneously. And they refer to us, the CEO magazine refers to us as a large company, but we tend to think of ourselves as really a small company, and where everybody has sort of the capability and is encouraged to interact amongst one another for the benefit of the people that work there, as well as for the benefit of our customers. So we really so this hierarchy thing is not something that we dwell on. Granted, in the various markets, there has to be someone you go to provide you guidance, or to tell you what your benefit plan is, but we don't make a big deal out of this person's the boss, and it's more you look to certain people, as you said before, for leadership, and but not sort of this arbitrary I say you do sort of thing.
What area of running a business do you find most challenging personally?
Well, one point I guess I would have said, as I referred to earlier, sort of the financial component, but over the passage of time, you really kind of acquire those skills, and you learn how to borrow money and hopefully spend it judiciously. I think the nature of operations is that they're sort of never ending, and they're ongoing. We have a large center in Las Vegas, actually, where a number of our customer calls go in there, and calls go in there, and then phones are shipped out of there, and they're repaired there, and so we have a lot of people working in one area, and there's a number of us that serve on, for want of a better word, kind of these committees. We have these committees that we call the Good to Great committees, where we're trying to, we lifted that from Mr. Collins, the author, and one of the things I sit on this committee with somebody who works on repairing phones and answers phones, and there's just a group of us that meet on a regular basis, and it's important that I participate in that. So you ask about challenges. Last week I had hoped to get down to Vegas in person for the meeting. I wound up having to do it over the phone because we had a number of people in from New York who, potential investors or people that are writing about the company. So I suppose what's most challenging is trying to get to everywhere you'd want to be. Is certainly something that you'd like to. You can only spread yourself so far.
Right. Have you found it hard or easy to maintain a healthy work-life balance?
Well, let's see. My wife's not here, so yes, absolutely. You have to be careful, because you can't burn the candle at both ends all the time. But I've never been really good at taking vacations, and it's just some people's genetic makeup is such that a lot of downtime may not be healthy for them. So, but on the other hand, we're big advocates of it in the I'm very good at preaching about it, and perhaps maybe not always so good at listening to the preaching. But
One of your favorite points of advice is never to burn a bridge. Why do you feel that that's so important, and have you ever burned one?
Well, it's a small world, and the world's getting smaller all the time. So it's really foolish to no matter where you are, at what stage of life, whether you're a student or whether you're in a certain company. With the way the world works, there's mergers that have taken place that no one ever would have imagined. 15, 10 years ago, what have you, 5 years ago. I mean, whoever thought AOL would buy Time Warner, and now Time Warner wish they never did. But I have run into so many of the same people, over the course of the years, and if you do a disservice to someone, there might be a pretty good chance that it'll come back to haunt you, and usually. Oftentimes people fall out of favor with one another for silly things. So it just just grin and bear it, and you'll probably find that it serves you well in the long run. So in terms of any specific bridge I ever burned, that English teacher's probably still mad at me.
She has one. But other than that, you're okay?
I hope so. I mean, I don't know. There's probably somebody out there. But.
I'd like to close with a quote from a former coworker, followed by a brief story from John's brother. The coworker said, "A lot can be written about the Nextel success, but behind it all is this very thoughtful, low-keyed man that will take the time out of his around-the-clock days to respond to any employee or customer that needs his attention. He has that rare talent to look at a challenge and make any situation better." And John's brother wrote, "On September 11th, I was stranded in Seattle. I couldn't get back to Boston, and I was staying with John. We both happened to be awake when the news about the Twin Towers was broadcast. The speed at which he contacted all the partners at Nextel and reminded them that in a crisis, people count on communications and that they all had a responsibility to contribute. It was inspiring. While most of the rest of us were in shock, he reminded me and all his colleagues that we weren't helpless and that we could begin to make things better. That's what leaders do."
Good job.